Hi there. Welcome. I'm ML Matt Buchman, and welcome to 5 Insider Factoids based on questions that you sent in or uh, have asked me. So let's talk about Gryphon, Miranda Chase number 14. Warning, this does include spoilers. First, I'd like to talk about the equipment that's in this. Gryphon is a Swedish Army jet, Swedish Air Force jet. Um, They've designed themselves for their own use. They're trying to sell it to other countries, of course, to make money. The It's an absolutely amazing, cutting edge aircraft. It doesn't have all the stealth stuff that some of the new, like the F-35 Lightning has or the F-22 Raptor. What they did was they said, we have a very specific problem here in Sweden, Russia. There have been so many wars between Sweden and Russia that it's like that's what they need to stay focused on. And they're actually watching the Ukraine war very carefully and how it's being played out more in the air than they expected. And they're making changes to their armament based on that. But the amazing thing about the Gryphon was they said we need it to not be stuck at a big central airfield so that a single bomb taking out a runway can block our Air Force. Instead, they're very short takeoff and landing. They're very quick, very agile. And they put little airports, little air bases all over Sweden. And they have little runways that are long enough for these planes, but they also have little side access roads to at least two other highways that are nearby. And I saw these when I was in Sweden. They have red lights like a couple kilometers apart, and they will turn on the lights, stop the cars, the plane will come out, take off on the road if their runway was damaged, and then the lights go green and the drivers go back to driving back and forth. Not only are they very agile, but they were also designed to be very easy to fix and very easy to maintain. So the Lightning II cost something like, I don't know, $35,000 per flight hour to maintain the aircraft and fuel the aircraft and pilot's time and so on. The Gryphon is something like 5,000 because they engineered simplicity into the airframe. Such simplicity, let's say you have a damaged engine. If you have a damaged engine in an F-35, you basically have to take the plane apart, put a new engine in, put the plane back together. The F-35, you undo some bolts, you pull the engine out on rails, you plug in the new one, and in 60 minutes, you're back in the air. The whole plane is designed that way. So it's just a fascinating machine. It's really forward thinking. Um, so it eschewed some of those things that people say are so essential to today's combat. No, it's an absolutely agile fighter. Uh, there are some very odd maneuvers that you see in like uh, Maverick. You see this plane go up and do this kind of daisy whirl to slow down and come and or change direction very abruptly. Well, the Swedes developed that, and the Gryphon was designed to really leverage that. And then the cruiser, the boat that is also here and has a role in the book. It's a stealth cruiser. It has an amazing amount of armament tucked away on it. It has a helicopter pad. It can go in very shallow water because it has water jet. So it doesn't, that's the big plume coming off the back. It doesn't have propellers that, so and the water jets are steerable, so it doesn't have rudders. So it's simpler and simpler to operate. And they can get into some of the weird shallow waters of the Baltic Sea. Again, their problem is the historic conflicts with Russia. Uh, it has a radar image of like a small fishing boat. It's just, it's a really amazing craft. So I had a lot of fun researching these. Very little of that actually made it into the book, but I spent hours and hours and hours watching videos about these two machines. Yes, I'm a nerd. What can I say? So let's talk about Holly and Mike. The My original plan for Holly and Mike was to be members of the team. I was not setting out to make the team all full of couples. Even coming out of romance, that was not my goal. My goal is this is a thriller. This is about the people working on the team in the thriller world. Holly and Mike started sleeping together, I think, in book 2 or 3. And it was like, okay, so why didn't they ever come together? They just keep sleeping together. They keep kind of denying that they're together for like 4 books. And then, yeah, we share a space. And so I keep getting asked by readers, what the heck is their problem? And um, I, their problem is it's not so much that they're commitment phobic, which they are because they both have. He was orphaned at 9, and her parents were so hard that she ran away from home at 16. Um, but they've both been very independent. She went to Special Operations Forces. These people, they work in a team, but the SOF can actually go out on their own. They're that specialized that they can be the solo operator in deep field. And for them, trust is only within the trained team. She doesn't trust anybody else around her. The fact that she trusts Miranda is because Miranda's Miranda. She's just that amazing. Mike has the same thing. He's a con man. Who would he trust? Certainly not some squared away ex-military type. And so the two of them have no image of being together. It's like they don't even have the language of what that would mean. And in this book, I they finally come to the realization. I finally couldn't sustain it any longer. Um, Basically, too many fans kept going, "What is their problem?" So this book was heavily about Mike and Holly's relationship and coming to the point where they're either going to blow apart or come together. And of course, I can't break up that core of the team, so um, we know the answer. But that's what's going on between them. Was I set out to write them as separate individuals, and they became them by being themselves, by being who they were. They were fine just sleeping together until finally they weren't, and it wasn't enough anymore. But then they had to get past all the issues they were carrying around with them. So let's talk about the plot of the book for the moment. How did I start in Sweden and Finland and end up in Georgia at the far end of Europe? And the reason is because Russia wants the 5 barriers between them and NATO. And when it was the Soviet Union, they controlled all of those. And what they are is they're land barriers, tank war thinking, troop thinking, not air thinking. And there were natural blockages, geographic blockages that sweep between Europe, um, Eastern and Western Europe, and the Caucasus Mountain. There are 3 places in the Ukraine, the Polish Gap, the Baltic Sea, and there are some others that separate them from China. And they want to, for their own security, control those. And that's the main thing the Ukrainian war is about. It's not just taking back what was part of the Soviet Union so it was ours. It's Russia deciding it needs to protect itself. So let's look at this map. And this shows pretty much the gaps they care about. So up here in the Baltic, this is St. Petersburg, and this is their sole peak out to the sea to get ships out to the Atlantic Ocean. because down here they have to come out through the Black Sea and then get past Greece and through the Mediterranean. So they really want to have control of this whole stretch here. Well, that means they have to take back Estonia and Latvia. Right here is Kaliningrad, which which is part of Russia. Then there's some mountains here. The Polish Gap, the problem is that there's no real natural barrier here. So what you want to do is you want to have some time. If an invading force is coming at you, you want them to have to cross a lot of things, rivers and plains and stuff, to slow them down until you can get into place. So this stretch of Poland, they really want back so that they can have that barrier of land distance from an invading force coming in from NATO. Then there's a nice mountain range here, then which notice is on the far side of Ukraine. Then Crimea gives them a warm water port that's a good warm water port if they can hold all of this part of Ukraine. And then Georgia, there's the Caucasus Mountains, and they actually snipped off two of the provinces of Georgia, East Ostia, and I forgot the name of the other at the moment. They're in the book. But because that gave them control of this mountain range over to Kazakhstan, which is friendly, and they've got Belarus, which is friendly. So that's what's going on behind the scenes in this book. And the plot is, of course, that somebody thinks, oh, we'll make it so that there's a war up here, and Russia focuses on the Baltic Sea opening so that they don't mess with us. So it's Georgia who's actually at the heart of this whole setup with Gryphon and Sweden and the problems they suddenly have with what they think is Russia, but it isn't. And now I have to talk about Assassi. So at the beginning of this book, I wanted my team to be well on its way to Europe because they work for the NTSB, which is the American US National Transportation Safety Board who investigates air crashes. They will sometimes be called in if if a crash in another country involves American hardware, like a Boeing plane, um, or some US military aircraft. The military may then in turn call in the NTSB in an advisory role. So I wanted my team to be headed that way so that they might be called into the Swedish crash, but especially because they're all the way from the West Coast. So it would normally be the East Coast division of the NTSB. They've got 5 regional offices across the country. Um, the East Coast would normally be called in. And it was like, what can I do to get them over there? But I didn't want them investigating a crash that I would then have to explain and would have to fit into the plot. I wanted them to simply be over in that direction. I was trying to think of, what would get them there, or at least partway there. And I was just about to attend a writers' conference in the next week or so as I was working on this book. And I suddenly went, what if, do they go to conferences? And so I Googled, and there popped up the International Society of Air Safety Investigators, which is what Miranda and her team are. And their next meeting was in 3 weeks in Nashville. And I live in Massachusetts. So it's like, okay, can I attend this? And so I applied, I got membership, and I went down and I spent 5 days with 330 people, mostly guys, but 330 people from 30 different countries, from Japan to Iceland to Ireland to India, all talking about air safety investigations. It's all they care about. That's their focus. And it was just like, oh my God, I had so much fun talking to these guys. And I'm, of course, a total research hound. So not only am I taking a lot of notes, but I came in well prepared. I wasn't, hi, come teach me about what you do. Uh, I would have lunch with like an old hand safe NTSB guy, and he finally looked at me and said, I think you may have read more NTSB reports than I have. And he was like, I felt pretty good about that. It's like, okay, I'm not being an imposter here. I'm actually trying to honor what these people do. And one of the funny stories that happened was uh, at that conference, and this is August 2023, Prigozhin, who was the head of the Russian Wagner group, the mercenary group, having already tried his coup and having been expelled and all the noise that went back and forth between he and Putin, his plane was shot out of the sky. And we were on lunch break, and I happened to be checking my email, and I took a quick look at the headlines, and there was his plane shot down. And so I mentioned it to the table. And the first thing we started doing was, okay, what kind of plane is it? How did it go down? And then they put up the little clip of a video, and we looked at how the plane was falling out of the sky. And I didn't get the model of the plane right, but my guess wasn't far off. And the other guys were throwing out ideas, and we had this great time. And then they would send a second video went up, and it was like that stopped all conversation about any implications or geopolitics. It was back to the plane and how it was falling and what that implied with the other. And they're like picking all these facts that I couldn't have seen about. Oh, it's clear it was shot down because we had a great time. So sorry, Prigozhin, but it was worth it. So coming together is sort of the last topic of this book, and it was I felt it was appropriate because we've got NATO on the verge of fracturing because Georgia versus Sweden at opposite ends, at opposite corners of Europe, and Mike and Holly trying to deny who they are and their attraction to each other, and Miranda and Andy having been blown apart. And so it, tried, I thought about, not tried, but I thought about, do they have to come together? Do I have to show a unity here to confront the world that's around us? How do we deal with this world around us? And all five of them, Meg being Miranda's new dog, her therapy dog, all five of them end up in the final scene and in the bonus scene, which is one of my favorites ever. So absolutely read it. But um, it's that coming together against or despite the world that we live in. It's cooperation, it's mutual support. And I decided that the team needed to move to the next level. And then, as an author in the next book, I'll have to figure out how to deal with the fact that I'm not going to be shattering these two couples anymore. They're going to stay as two couples, I think, unless something else goes sideways. But um, this is my core team, and these are my heroes of books to come. And I wanted them to move to the next level and become more of who they are because they're their best selves when they're together. And that's something I always seek, is to champion those around me, to help those around me. So I was really happy with the way this one ended. Thanks so much for joining me. Uh, please visit my website at mlbuchman.com. There's more about my books, there's newsletters. Contact me with any new questions. I'm glad to answer them. There's also all the links to bonus scene stories, recipes based on the book. Um, I'm pretty pleased with how the cheese bread came out for this book. So thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed. Bye.